The first scream came just after the plane pierced through a wall of thick gray clouds, and for a moment every passenger believed it was only turbulence. But then the woman in seat 3A collapsed. Her breathing turned shallow, her skin pale, and the expensive diamond bracelet on her wrist clinked against the armrest as her body trembled uncontrollably. Panic spread through the business class cabin like fire through dry grass. Flight attendants rushed forward, passengers stood halfway from their seats, and someone shouted for a doctor. 30,000 feet above the earth, with nowhere to land for hours, a billionaire's life was slipping away, and the man who would save her, almost no one even noticed. Before we continue this powerful story, take a quick second to support the channel. If you believe kindness still exists in the world, and that one good act can change everything, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this. Also tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. Now let's return to the moment that changed everything. At first, no one paid attention to the man sitting quietly in row 18. He looked ordinary. His faded gray shirt stretched across strong shoulders, his jeans slightly worn at the knees. His hair was neatly trimmed but simple, and his tired eyes carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who worked hard every day just to stay afloat. His name was Daniel Carter. Most people on that plane saw him as just another passenger flying economy, but Daniel saw something others didn't. From across the aisle, he noticed the subtle signs that made his stomach tighten with recognition. The woman in first class wasn't just fainting. Her muscles were locking, her breathing pattern erratic, and her lips were turning a frightening shade of blue. Daniel stood up immediately. The flight attendants were already gathering around her, trying to follow emergency procedures, but panic was clouding their movements. One of them asked if anyone had medical training. Several passengers shook their heads. A few simply stared. Daniel moved forward through the aisle without hesitation. He wasn't loud. He didn't announce himself, but something in his calm presence made people step aside instinctively. When he reached the woman, he quickly assessed the situation with focused eyes. Her pulse was racing but weak, and her chest struggled to rise with each breath. The flight attendant explained they believed she was having a severe allergic reaction, but the emergency kit had already been used on another passenger earlier in the flight, and their epinephrine supply was empty. That was when Daniel quietly reached into his backpack. Inside was a small medical pouch. He carried it everywhere, not because he was a doctor, but because life had taught him the hard way how quickly things could go wrong. Years earlier, Daniel's wife had died from a sudden allergic reaction at a roadside restaurant while traveling. By the time help arrived, it was too late. After that day, Daniel had sworn something to himself. He would never be helpless again. Since then, he had taken emergency medical courses, read everything he could about trauma response, and always carried basic life-saving supplies, including a single emergency injection he had purchased months earlier after saving for weeks. He had originally bought it for his young daughter. Now, he was about to use it on a stranger. The flight attendants watched nervously as Daniel quickly prepared the injection. His hands moved with steady precision despite the turbulence shaking the aircraft. Passengers nearby held their breath. Some were filming. Others prayed silently. The woman's body had begun to convulse more violently, and time was running out. Daniel administered the injection carefully and then gently adjusted her position to keep her airway open. Every movement was controlled, purposeful, and calm. For a few terrifying seconds, nothing happened. Then her breathing slowly began to stabilize. The color started returning to her face. A faint pulse strengthened under Daniel's fingers. The tension in the cabin shifted instantly. Someone gasped. A flight attendant covered her mouth with relief. Daniel remained focused for several more minutes, monitoring her breathing until it became steady enough that he knew she would survive until the plane could land. Only then did he step back. No applause, no announcement, just a quiet nod to the crew as he returned to his seat. Most people assumed he was a medical professional, but Daniel didn't correct them. He simply sat down again in row 18, opened the small notebook he had been writing in earlier, and continued where he left off. 3 hours later, the plane landed safely. Paramedics rushed on board immediately and carefully transferred the woman to a stretcher. The flight attendants explained everything that had happened, pointing toward the man who had saved her life. But when they turned to row 18, the seat was empty. Daniel Carter had vanished. No goodbye, no recognition, no explanation. No explanation. By the time airport staff checked the passenger list and security cameras, he had already left the terminal. Meanwhile, the woman he saved was waking up inside a private hospital suite. Her name was Victoria Langston, one of the wealthiest business leaders in the world. The CEO of a global technology empire worth billions, and a woman known for her relentless drive and almost myth-like influence in the business world. But when Victoria opened her eyes, the first thing she asked was not about her company, her schedule, or her investments. She asked about the man who saved her life. At first, no one could answer. Days passed while investigators tried to track him down. Victoria's team reviewed passenger lists, security footage, and airline records. Eventually, they found the name connected to seat 18C, Daniel Carter. But that name led them to a small town hundreds of miles away, a modest neighborhood where houses were old but cared for, where neighbors still greeted each other by name, and where life moved at a slower pace than the world Victoria controlled. When her private assistant finally arrived at Daniel's address, what she found surprised everyone. The house was small, paint slightly chipped, a bicycle leaned against the porch. Children's drawings decorated the windows. Inside lived Daniel and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily Isla. Daniel worked 2 jobs to support her, one at a construction company during the day and another delivering groceries at night. Despite the exhaustion, every evening he still helped Lily with homework, cook dinner, and read her bedtime stories. His life was simple, but it was full of quiet love. When Victoria's assistant finally met Daniel, he seemed confused by the attention. He had no idea the woman he saved was one of the richest people alive. He had simply seen someone who needed help. That was enough. When Victoria heard this, something inside her shifted. For years, she had lived surrounded by wealth, influence, and ambition. But the man who saved her life had none of those things. Yet he had something far more powerful: compassion without expectation and humility without limit. Victoria insisted on meeting him personally. Weeks later, a black car pulled up outside Daniel's modest home. When he opened the door, he was stunned to see the woman he had saved standing there, healthy, grateful, and carrying a quiet determination in her eyes. What happened during that visit would change both of their lives forever. But before we reach the ending of this story, take a moment to write something in the comments. Type the word kindness if you believe that even the smallest good deed can echo across the world in ways we never expect. Because Daniel Carter never imagined that helping a stranger would rewrite the future of his daughter's life. Victoria spent the entire afternoon listening to Daniel's story, not just the plane incident, but his struggles as a single father, the loss of his wife, the years of sacrifice. The way he always put Lily first, even when life was unfair. She saw something rare in him. Not desperation, not bitterness, but strength and a quiet dignity that money could never buy. By the time she left his home that evening, Victoria had made a decision. 1 month later, Daniel received a letter. Inside was an offer that stunned him. Victoria had created a charitable foundation in his name, a foundation dedicated to providing emergency medical training and life-saving equipment to communities across the country. And she wanted Daniel to lead it. His first instinct was to refuse. He believed there were people far more qualified. But Victoria reminded him of something simple. Skills could be taught, character could not. Daniel eventually accepted, and over the next few years, the Daniel Carter Foundation trained thousands of ordinary people in emergency response skills. Lives were saved in schools, in restaurants, on highways, on airplanes, all because one single father chose to help someone without asking who they were. Victoria often said that the most valuable investment she ever made wasn't in technology or business. It was in a man who once sat quietly in row 18 of an airplane, a man the world almost overlooked, but who proved that true heroes rarely wear titles. They simply act. And sometimes they disappear before anyone even realizes what they've done. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes the world still needs more kindness, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful true style stories. Because somewhere out there today, someone like Daniel Carter is quietly changing a life, and the world may never know their name. The story of Daniel Carter was supposed to end the day he saved Victoria Langston on that airplane. At least that's what Daniel believed. For him, it had been a simple moment. A stranger needed help, and he did what any decent person should do. He never imagined that single act would ripple across the world like a stone dropped into still water. But sometimes the quietest people create the loudest echoes. And Daniel Carter was about to learn just how far kindness can travel. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a quick moment to support the channel. If you believe ordinary people can still do extraordinary things, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and subscribe for more powerful emotional stories. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts around the world. Now, the real transformation begins. When Daniel first stepped into the glass headquarters of the newly created Carter Foundation, he felt completely out of place. The building was massive, polished floors, walls of shining steel and glass, offices filled with experts and professionals who had years of education and experience. Compared to them, Daniel still felt like the same construction worker who had spent most of his life carrying heavy tools under the sun. But Victoria Langston never doubted him for a second. From the beginning, she insisted the foundation should reflect Daniel's values, not corporate rules. Instead of focusing on complicated programs or expensive campaigns, Daniel proposed something simple. Teach ordinary people how to save lives. He remembered the helplessness he had felt when his wife died years earlier. The moment when everyone around them panicked because no one knew what to do. Daniel wanted to change that. Within the first year, the Carter Foundation began offering free emergency medical training sessions in small towns, schools, airports, community centers, and workplaces across the country. At first, attendance was small, but slowly, stories began to spread. A high school student saved his teacher during a severe allergic reaction. A bus driver revived a passenger suffering from cardiac arrest. A restaurant server helped a choking child before paramedics arrived. Each time it happened, the same training appeared in the background. Training created by a single father who once sat quietly in row 18 of an airplane. Victoria watched all of this with quiet pride. For years, she had built companies worth billions of dollars, but nothing had ever felt as meaningful as watching lives saved because of a program born from simple compassion. And Daniel never changed. Even after the foundation grew nationwide, he still drove his daughter Lily to school every morning. He still cooked dinner most nights, and he still tucked her into bed with the same bedtime stories he had always told. The only difference was that Lily now understood something about her father that the world was beginning to discover. He was a hero. But Daniel never allowed the attention to change who he was. Whenever reporters tried to interview him, he always redirected the spotlight to the people being trained. Anyone can learn to save a life, he would say. You just need the chance. 3 years passed. The Carter Foundation had trained over 200,000 people. And then something unexpected happened. One winter evening, during a major charity event hosted by Victoria Langston, a sudden emergency struck. The ballroom was filled with powerful executives, politicians, and international guests. Cameras flashed as speeches celebrated the success of the foundation. Daniel had just finished thanking the audience when a sudden commotion erupted near the back of the room. An elderly man collapsed. Within seconds, panic rippled across the crowd. But this time, something was different. Before the fear could spread, 3 people rushed forward. A waitress, a young intern, and a security guard. All 3 had taken Carter Foundation training. They moved with calm coordination, checking breathing, stabilizing the man, and beginning emergency procedures while paramedics were called. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, watching from the stage. His chest tightened as emotion flooded through him. Because this was exactly what he had hoped for. Ordinary people stepping forward when it mattered most. The man survived. And as the crowd realized what had just happened, the entire ballroom erupted into applause. Not for the wealthy guests, not for the celebrities, but for the quiet ripple of kindness that had spread from one act of courage. Victoria walked onto the stage beside Daniel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she looked at the crowd and said something that would later appear in newspapers around the world. 3 years ago, a man saved my life on an airplane and disappeared before anyone could thank him. Today, thousands of people are alive because he didn't stay invisible forever, the audience stood. Applause thundered through the room, but Daniel felt something else entirely: gratitude. Not for the recognition, but for the chance to turn one painful memory into something that saved others. Later that night, long after the event ended, Daniel returned home. Lily was already asleep. He sat quietly at the edge of her bed, watching her peaceful breathing in the soft glow of the nightlight. Sometimes he wondered what his wife would think if she could see everything that had happened. The foundation, the lives saved, the world that had changed because of a moment that once seemed so small. Daniel gently kissed Lily's forehead and whispered a promise he had made many times before. He would always do his best to leave the world kinder. Then he found it. Before we reach the final moment of this story, I want to ask you something important. If this story touched your heart even a little, please write the word kindness in the comments right now. It helps spread this message further and reminds others that compassion still exists in our world. Now let's finish this journey. Years later, the Carter Foundation would become one of the largest emergency preparedness programs in the world. Millions of people would receive training. Countless lives would be saved. And every new volunteer would hear the same story during their first orientation. A story about a single father sitting quietly in economy class on a flight where no one expected a hero. A man who didn't ask who the patient was. A man who didn't wait for recognition. A man who simply acted, because kindness doesn't need permission. It just needs someone brave enough to begin. And somewhere out there right now, another Daniel Carter may be sitting quietly in a crowd, ready to change a life when the moment arrives. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful emotional stories like this one. Because sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones the world almost misses